This is golf club explained for beginners. This is a driver. The driver is the biggest headed club in the bag. It can be a maximum of 460 cubic centimeters. The loft ranges from anything from 7 degrees up to 12 degrees. 7 degrees for very fast swing speeds and people who hit very high up on the ball, much like a long driver. A professional will play between 8 and 10 degrees, and then for people with slower swing speeds, you're going to find 10 to 12 degrees to help get the ball up with a slower swing speed. The shaft is almost always now graphite. They come in different stiffnesses. The stiffness will depend on the tempo of your swing and the speed of your swing. My swing is about 115 mile an hour, so I have an X-stiff shaft. So you get extra stiff toward the top range, you get stiff below that, a little bit more flexible, you get regular, then more flexible, then you get light regular, and then you get a senior flex, which is very flexible and for much slower swing speeds, and then the slower swing speed all the way down to what they call ladies flex. Next in the bag you have Fairway Woods. Why do I go from driver to Fairway Woods? Because these are the next longest clubs in the bag. We started a 3-wood. This is a very difficult club for beginners to hit. The reason I say that is that a driver you're teeing up very high. A 3-wood you can tee up very high, but the club face is very small and you're only getting another like 4 or 5 degrees of loft compared to your driver, and a very long shaft. The longer the shaft, the longer the ball goes, but the less control you have over it, especially with lower loft and smaller faces like this. So a 3-wood, not really advisable for beginners. It's also made a similar way to a driver. It's got a big head, it's got probably some weights in the bottom. It's going to do everything possible to help you get the ball in the air, but hitting a 3-wood off the fairway, off the ground, is a very difficult thing to do, and I actually don't recommend anything below 17 degrees for a newer player, which moves us more toward the 5-wood. So the 5-wood, higher number, higher loft, 3, 5, this one is probably going to be 16, 17, 18 degrees, and you can hit this one more off the ground and hit it off the tee as well. These Fairway Woods all have the same shafts, it's all graphite. The difference is the length of the shaft gets shorter as you go from 3 to 5 to 7. So a 3-wood is longer than a 5-wood, and a 5-wood is longer than a 7-wood, which in general, a shorter shaft also means more control. So that's why a 5-wood and 7-wood are much more conducive to beginner play than a 3-wood and even a driver. If you do like a driver, I would highly recommend starting with a 11, 12, 13 degree driver. 5-woods can be very helpful for a beginner player, but if you're really looking for a fairway wood, regardless of your handicap, whether you're a beginner or someone who's been playing a long time, the 7-wood is the one I recommend the most. This is a Tacoma 7-wood, and let me tell you something, this is a cheat code club. It doesn't matter what you say. This is one of the easiest clubs to hit. This thing's got probably 20, 21, 22 degrees of loft. It's got this big body, it's got this nice fat sole, it interacts with the turf really nicely, and this club with a shorter shaft, also graphite, and higher loft, shorter shaft, higher loft, more control, is going to get you nice high shots in play almost every time. The next thing we have in the bag are hybrids. Now a hybrid is a replacement for an iron. They only really come mostly in 2, 3, 4, 5 hybrid. You do get 6, 7 and 8, but they're very niche. The majority of manufacturers are going to have a 3, 4 and 5 hybrid. The reason they made hybrids is that to hit a traditional long iron, you've got very low loft, a very thin sole. It's very difficult to get the technique right as a beginner player, high handicapper, to get that ball airborne, to swing without trying to get it airborne and giving it extra loft. And with a heavy steel shaft. That's a very difficult club to hit, a 4, 5 or 3 iron. So what they did is they created a club that's a mix between a wood and an iron. It's got the same low loft, but remember, they start 3, 4 and 5. That means a 3 hybrid will have similar loft to a 3 iron, like 20 degrees, which is still pretty easy to hit, especially when you put a fat booty behind it. If you don't have the fat booty and you have a 3 iron made of just steel, iron with a steel shaft, that's difficult to hit. But when you add a fat body like this with a bouncy face made of probably steel or titanium, that's going to help you get the ball up. And they also give you graphite shafts in hybrids. Why? Because it's so light compared to steel that you can get more swing speed to get the ball up in the air without manipulating the ball flight. That's why hybrids are very recommended if you struggle with your long irons. The next thing we have are iron sets. Iron sets come in multiple flavors. Super Game Improvement irons. This is a 101T from Tacoma. These are hollow back irons. These are designed specifically to help people get the ball in the air. Even when they misstrike the ball all over the club face, it's designed with a hollow interior to make the ball spring further, even on off-center hits. The sole is a bit fatter than most other iron sets. That still helps to get the ball in the air as it interacts with the turf in a way that's not digging into the ground like something thinner. It hits the turf and keeps the club moving, hoping to get the ball in the air for you. The aim of the game for Super Game Improvement irons for beginners to help you more and give you a helping hand to enjoy golf in the beginning. Next, what you have is a normal cavity back. What you'll find in golf clubs is that a cavity back and a muscle back or blade. A muscle back will have all the steel directly in the back, and the cavity back will have all that steel too, except they move some from the middle of the face or the middle of the back and move it around the edge. That's called perimeter weighting, and they'll move even more weight down here to increase the center of gravity so that you can get the ball airborne more. Another thing you'll notice about cavity backs is that they have a bit of a grind here on the front versus less on a blade, and a thicker sole on the cavity back versus a very thin sole on the blades. The blades are very difficult to hit clubs. For beginners, it's nice to know about them, nice to perv over them, nice to think, wow, they look so beautiful. But you know what? These are reserved for people who hit the ball in the sweet spot 7 or 8 times out of 10. For you, you may want to focus on Super Game Improvement irons or a game improvement cavity back like this that helps you get the ball in the air, helps you when you hit the ball in the wrong place, not on the sweet spot, helping you to get more distance and still stay on target. If you miss the sweet spot on a blade, it hurts like hell and you don't want to play golf anymore. Believe me, I've been there. Then you get a player's cavity back. These clubs, the normal player's cavity back, have very little offset, whereas the Super Game Improvement irons seem a little bit closed. If I were you as a beginner, I would hold off on the player's cavity backs and player's muscle backs. Anything saying player's, muscle back, blade, tour. Don't play those clubs. You want anything that's got game improvement in it, anything hollow, anything deep cavity back. Those are going to be your best bet to start enjoying the game quicker, get your scores down, and then once you've been playing a couple of years, of course, you're going to want to upgrade your equipment and you're going to look at something a little bit more higher grade. But for now, those are your best bet. Iron sets come with steel shafts nowadays. You can get them with graphite. They've got advanced technologies now for graphite. Mostly they're going to be steel. Now you also get stiffnesses that vary from regular to stiff to extra stiff to double extra stiff. If you're not swinging too quickly and you may be a beginner, you may want to look at something like graphite shafts. They do put graphite shafts in some irons. Nowadays, iron sets generally come from 4 iron down to pitching wedge. You can get 5 iron to pitching wedge, 6 iron to pitching wedge. Then you can fill up your bag with like hybrids or fairway woods above a 6 iron or 5 iron. But generally you're going to find most sets coming with 4 iron down to pitching wedge. What does that mean? It means that the lowest loft will be 4 iron and the highest loft will be pitching wedge. These clubs will go less distance as you go from 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 P. 4 iron goes longer than a 5 iron, which goes longer than a 6 iron, which goes longer than a 7 iron, which goes longer than an 8, which goes longer than a 9, and a pitching wedge. There's generally about 3 to 4 degrees between each iron. So from 4 to 5 is 3 degrees. From 9 to pitching wedge, generally a 4-degree difference in loft. What is the loft? Loft is the angle between the shaft and the club face. That angle from there to there, that is going to be on like a pitching wedge, probably about 45 degrees. As you go into longer clubs, you're going to see that the loft gets much flatter. Another feature of iron sets is that when you go from 4 iron down to pitching wedge, the length of the club changes a lot. So you can see the 4 iron is a lot longer than the pitching wedge. When you go from 4 iron down to pitching wedge, each club progressively gets shorter to end at the pitching wedge there, like in a linear fashion. You get forged irons and you get cast iron. A forged iron like these Tacomos are made from one piece of steel that's smashed into shape. Beautiful. You can bend it, you can do anything you want without it breaking. A cast iron is a little bit cheaper generally, and also mainly made in cavity back or super game improvement irons, and that's when they pour into a mold and it sets. These ones can't be bent that much, maybe bent once, and then the second time you bend them back, it cracks and breaks. Forged clubs are just a bit softer, and cast clubs just feel a bit firmer. Not really much difference if you're a beginner player. You want to just get something the most forgiving, which is generally a hollow club or a deep cavity back, either cast or forged. You're going to upgrade one day, I promise. So expect to upgrade when you get addicted to the game. But to get addicted to the game, get the easiest to hit clubs by trying a few, and don't listen to dingleberries on the internet telling you to start with blades, because those people are perennial 34 handicaps. Mostly irons go from 4 down to pitching wedge. Then you get the next layer of clubs, which are wedges. These wedges generally have the loft written on the bottom of the club. The standard way to put your set together is to have a 4 to pitching wedge, and then definitely a sand wedge. And a sand wedge can either be called a S or a 56 degree. This one is going to be used perfectly for the name, sand. From the sand, you're going to be hitting lofted shots with this. And this club is specifically made for sand and for higher lofted shots. You want one of these in your bag, 100%. You can purchase these separate, or if you get a set that has almost everything in it, most of the time it's going to go to 4 to pitching wedge and give you a sand wedge. Now the interesting thing to know as a beginner is that your pitching wedge may have a 45 degree angle of loft, so it's 45. That one has 56. Remember, all the irons in the set have between 3 and 4 degrees. The difference between clubs of 3 degree and 4 degree lofts in your irons gives you a distance difference between each iron of probably about 8 to 11 or 12 yards. Now that's a big difference on a small amount of loft, just 4 degrees or 3 degrees. So you can imagine from a 56 degree wedge to a 46 degree pitching wedge, that's 10 degrees. So 10 degrees, what does that equate to? Maybe slower swing speed. You're probably looking at 20 to 30 yard difference between your two wedges. And that's where the thing called a gap wedge or an approach wedge comes into play. Now, a gap wedge can be anything from 48 degrees to 52 degrees, or even be called an A wedge. But the name you'll often see is A wedge, G wedge, gap wedge, approach wedge, A for approach, G for gap, 48 degree, 52 degree, 50 degree. Now you can decide, a pretty easy way, if you're going to use the same manufacturer, is to go pitching wedge loft and sand wedge loft. What's the difference of the two clubs, and divided by 2. So let's say it's 46 and 56. Now you want like a 51 degree gap wedge, which is difficult to find, so you're going to go 50 or 52. Whichever is going to fill that gap for you nicely. As a beginner, you're going to see the pros and a lot of low handicaps and cool people using a 60 degree wedge a lot. This is a very technical club. This is a very difficult club. Often you'll find the driver and the 60 degree. The top and bottom of the bag are going to be the most difficult for beginners to play, and high handicappers. There's a lot that goes on in a 60 degree wedge. There's grind, there's bounce, there's the size of the sole, there's the weight. So I don't really recommend a 60 degree for most beginners. It's a cool club, but it has a specific purpose and can't really be used as often as people like to use it, because I think they could get better results not using it. So before we move on to putters, there are very easy to hit sand wedges like the Cleveland S wedge. Now this is a kind of game improvement sand wedge that's specifically made to help you to stop duffing your chips. You can see how fat the sole is, and it's used for sand and for chipping around the greens, making it much easier to get the ball out. This is an option for you if you're getting started, and you actually can keep this club for a very long time until you want to upgrade to a more blade-like wedge. If you suck at chipping, you get such a thing as a chipper. This is made exactly like a putter, except you're not allowed to have a putter grip, and it's got an angled face, probably about the same loft as an 8-iron or 9-iron, and you just hit it like a putt, like that, and it doesn't duff as much. It's got a nice fat sole. You use your putting stroke, and this can save a lot of people's chipping games. Next we have a putter. This is a blade. This is a bird dog that I make. This is made of Damascus steel, very expensive piece, very, very soft. Now a blade putter is very thin, and it's quite long, and it's a lot more difficult to align correctly. This is more like a putt for someone with feel and artistry, like a magic wand. But you'll find that this helps the stroke that goes on a more arc fashion, a more arc stroke. You can't really do this one with a straight back and through stroke, very difficult. The next is a mallet. Now this one you might not call a full mallet, this one might be a compact mallet or something like that, and you'll find these are very often swan neck or double bend shafts. Generally you're going to find on a blade putter, you're actually not going to find so much this kind of a shaft which just bends back once. You often find I think it's called a plumber's neck, so it goes down, bends 90 degrees and another 90 degrees. With a mallet, most of the time these putters are designed to go straight back and through. Of course you can't completely eliminate the arc, but these ones are made more for less arcing strokes, often more mechanical or engineering style players, less feel-based. They can be very forgiving on the face, whereas a blade putter can be, like the golf clubs, a lot less forgiving than a cavity back. So this one very often is something that's easier to align as well. You know, this is not a very big one, but you can see this color and that length of the back of the club really helps you to align your eyes to your putting line. The other one is a high MOI putter. So we've got a spider here. This is a tailor-made spider, and there's a lot of weight throughout this head, and a lot of that weight can push from the back, so you don't have to hit the ball as hard. With the blade putter, you're often hitting it a little firmer because they can feel a bit lighter, and then on the same putt, you feel like you're hitting it a bit softer with one of these high MOI putters because it just generates more energy from the back with a kind of gentler stroke, a smoother stroke. They often have inserts on these putters, and on mallets there's often inserts on the faces, whereas in the blade putters you don't find inserts that much besides in a few models. They're mainly milled steel. These ones are very easy to align. You can see the alignment aid on the back here. This is a very simple one. Some are very intricate, and you'll find these ones also come with these kind of double neck shafts like that. These are very forgiving of the face and can be a very nice thing to have, but only if it really suits your stroke. So my recommendation for putters is go have someone look at how you hit a putt, go get them to teach you how to putt, and then you can use the putter that's best for your stroke. It's very important. You don't want to be a straight back and through putter with a blade, and you don't want to be a big arc stroke putter with a mallet. Very often these are face balanced, so the face points to the sky, whereas a blade is very toe down. And then you might find the mallet might be in between that, just a little bit of what they call toe flow. So it's not quite toe balance, or it's not quite face balance, it still hangs just a little bit, but clearly not as extreme as a blade.